The last thing America needs right now is another war. Before proceeding, if you are new to our live story box, please like and subscribe to the channel. These chilling words thundered through the grand, echoing halls of the U.S. Senate this morning, a moment that instantly captured the attention of Washington's most powerful decision-makers, media outlets, and ordinary Americans sitting far from the Capitol. For years, political battles in the Senate have been predictable, a sharp divide between Republicans and Democrats. The same familiar faces arguing on opposite sides, but not today. The battle was brewing within the Democratic Party itself, exposing rare cracks in a political wall that usually holds together under the pressure of global threats. This wasn't a clash between the left and the right. It was Democrat versus Democrat. And at the heart of this firestorm, a single, haunting question. Should the United States launch direct military strikes on Iran's suspected nuclear sites or not? For months, whispers of Iran accelerating its nuclear weapons program have been making their way through intelligence briefings. But when a classified report leaked to the press last week, revealing satellite images showing what experts say could be the final stages of Iran's nuclear buildup, everything changed. Suddenly, the political temperature in Washington shot to boiling point. Some top Senate Democrats, backed by hawkish advisors and military strategists, immediately raised the alarm. They argued that this was America's last window of opportunity to prevent Iran from joining the ranks of nuclear-armed nations. In their view, launching swift, targeted strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities wasn't just an option, it was an absolute necessity. If we wait any longer, warned one senior Democrat, we may wake up to find that Iran has the bomb, and then we'll be dealing with a much bigger problem. Prevention is the only sane course. Their voices were loud, urgent, demanding action, but standing firmly and defiantly on the other side were equally powerful Democrats, including Senate veterans who remember all too well the ghosts of past wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. These leaders stepped forward to issue a stark warning to their colleagues and to the American people. We don't need to escalate this, declared Senator Mark Jefferson. We need to negotiate harder, apply smarter pressure, use every tool of diplomacy we have, because if we launch a strike on Iran, the Middle East will erupt into chaos, and the United States could be dragged into yet another endless war. The Senate chamber fell silent as his words hung in the air, heavy, ominous, undeniable, for the first time in months. The usual battle lines in Congress blurred. The traditional wall between Democrats and Republicans didn't matter anymore. Instead, the Democrats themselves, the president's own party, were deeply and bitterly divided, and this was no ordinary political squabble over taxes or immigration policy. This was war and peace, life and death, a decision that could shape the future of not just the United States, but the entire world. The debate grew hotter behind closed doors. Senior intelligence officials briefed both sides, warning of the risks and the consequences of every possible action. Military advisors laid out grim scenarios: missile strikes, cyber attacks, counter-strikes by Iran, potential retaliation against U.S. allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia. Some senators privately admitted that the danger of launching a preemptive strike is immeasurable. Iran has powerful militias spread across the region, including Hezbollah in Lebanon and various armed groups in Iraq and Syria, ready to unleash fury if Tehran gives the order, but others were equally certain that inaction carried the greatest risk. If Iran crosses the nuclear threshold, they argued, America's enemies and even its allies will see Washington as weak and hesitant. The world would become a far more dangerous place. Caught between these two camps is the American public. Watching, waiting, worried. Polls show that Americans are almost evenly split. Some fear the shadow of another Iraq-style conflict. Others believe a nuclear-armed Iran would pose a far greater long-term threat, and all the while, Iran's government remains defiant. Tehran insists its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, energy, medical research, national pride. But Western intelligence agencies, and many in the U.S. government, are convinced otherwise. In the Senate chamber, tempers flared. private conversations turned into sharp arguments. Allies clashed. Old friendships strained under the weight of impossible choices. For a brief moment this morning, the world glimpsed the terrible pressure that comes with being a superpower on the edge of crisis. The decision to strike or not to strike could change the course of history. One thing was clear to everyone in the room: there is no easy way out. There is no safe choice. Either path, war or diplomacy, carries risks that could reshape the Middle East for generations. And for the first time in years, the Democratic Party, usually unified on foreign policy matters, is publicly and painfully divided. As the Senate recessed for private negotiations, one senator was overheard muttering, "We're standing on the edge of something very dangerous. And I'm not sure anyone here knows which way to step. The world is watching, America is deciding, and time is running out." Why did this sudden political eruption shake the very foundations of the U.S. Senate? What caused Democrats, usually careful to show party unity, to clash so openly and forcefully before the world's eyes? It all started with a quiet leak, a secret that wasn't meant to leave the secure rooms of the Pentagon and the CIA. But somehow it did. And when that classified intelligence report reached the hands of a major news network, the fuse was lit. The report was shocking. According to high-resolution satellite images analyzed by multiple intelligence agencies, Iran's nuclear program was far more advanced than anyone had publicly admitted. The images showed construction, movement of equipment, and suspicious activity at Iran's key underground nuclear sites designed to withstand conventional bombing. But that wasn't the most alarming part. The report estimated that Iran could be just weeks away from completing a nuclear weapon breakthrough, a point of no return. After that, even direct military strikes might not stop them from eventually producing a bomb. For some in Washington, this was the worst possible news. The pro-strike camp, a small but fierce group of senators from the president's own Democratic Party, immediately raised the alarm. They argued that the time for diplomacy was over, that sanctions, talks, and warnings had failed, that Iran had deceived the world for too long. One senator, speaking anonymously to the press, put it this way: "This is it. This is the last window we'll ever have to stop Iran from becoming nuclear. If we wait, they will have the bomb, and the world will never be the same. North Korea showed us what happens when you wait too long. We can't make the same mistake twice." In their view, launching limited, precise military strikes to destroy Iran's nuclear sites wasn't just an option, it was an urgent necessity. Wait too long, they argued, and the entire Middle East could tip into a nuclear arms race. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, all might feel pressured to build bombs of their own. Even worse, a nuclear-armed Iran could threaten Israel, U.S. forces in the region, and even American cities someday. The stakes, they claimed, were no less than global stability itself, but across the aisle, or rather, across their own party, stood a very different group of Democrats, led by seasoned political veterans like Senator Mark Jefferson. And they were outraged. In a surprise conference on the steps of the Capitol, Jefferson faced the cameras and made his position crystal clear. "We don't need to escalate this conflict. We don't need another war in the Middle East. We've spent 2 decades bleeding money, resources, and American lives in Iraq and Afghanistan, and what did it get us? Nothing but endless chaos. We need to negotiate harder. Apply smarter pressure. Use diplomacy like a weapon, not missiles." His voice trembled with frustration, not at Iran, but at his own colleagues. He reminded the country that military action has consequences that can spiral out of control fast. Iran wouldn't simply absorb such an attack and do nothing. Tehran would retaliate, perhaps against U.S. bases in Iraq or Syria, against Israel, or even through cyber warfare and terrorism on American soil. He wasn't alone. A growing number of senators and foreign policy experts backed Jefferson, warning that strikes would only push Iran to secretly rebuild its nuclear program even faster, or worse, to openly sprint toward a bomb for self-defense. They argued that economic pressure was finally working. Sanctions had deeply hurt Iran's economy. Public protests inside Iran were growing louder. The regime was under pressure from its own people. Why ruin that progress with a war? But their opponents were unmoved. Diplomacy is dead, one pro-strike senator fired back. We've been negotiating with Iran for 20 years, and where has it gotten us? Lies, deception, broken promises. While we talk, they build? Time is up. The American public watched this bitter democratic civil war unfold with growing unease. Who was right? Were Iranian scientists truly on the verge of success, or was this another exaggerated intelligence report, like the false claims about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction in 2003? Social media exploded. Pundits debated furiously on TV. Polls showed the nation split down the middle. Was Iran really that close to building a bomb? Or was fear and the ghosts of past wars driving Washington to the edge of another disastrous conflict? In the absence of hard answers, only questions filled the air. How reliable was the intelligence? Could Iran be bluffing? Was there time left for diplomacy or not? These doubts, these dark unknowns, are why the Senate is now in open revolt, why the president's own party is tearing itself apart, and why the world holds its breath, unsure which path America will choose to strike. Or not to strike? This is the agonizing question hanging over Washington. A decision that could shape the future of the Middle East and the world for decades to come. And no matter which path America chooses, the risks are enormous. For the senators who support military action, the argument seems clear. They believe the United States cannot afford to let Iran cross the nuclear threshold. A nuclear-armed Iran, they argue, would instantly become the most dangerous force in the region, threatening not only its neighbors but also U.S. interests around the globe. But even they admit, this would be no simple mission. If the U.S. were to launch airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, it would not be like previous limited strikes in places like Syria or Libya. Iran's nuclear program is carefully hidden, heavily fortified, and spread out over multiple underground locations, some buried deep beneath mountains. Destroying them would take more than a few precision bombs. It could require days, or even weeks, of sustained attacks, and Iran wouldn't sit quietly while this happened. Experts warn that Tehran is likely to retaliate immediately and violently. Its military could strike U.S. bases scattered across Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. It could launch missiles at Israel, Saudi Arabia, or even shut down the vital Strait of Hormuz, the narrow sea lane through which 20% of the world's oil flows. Every day, imagine the chaos if that happened. Global oil markets would instantly panic. The price of crude could soar to $150 or even $200 a barrel, sending gasoline prices in the United States and Europe skyrocketing overnight. At home, American drivers could see fuel prices double or triple right in the middle of a fragile economic recovery. But the danger wouldn't end there. Iran controls powerful militias in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, armed groups like Hezbollah that have long threatened U.S. allies in the region. In the event of war, these groups could unleash waves of rocket attacks on cities like Tel Aviv, Riyadh, and Dubai, or even stage terrorist attacks in Western cities, and that's just the start. Full-scale conflict with Iran could draw in other world powers, Russia, China, and European nations, each with their own interests and alliances. The conflict could quickly spiral into a dangerous, unpredictable regional war, one that America might find impossible to escape for many in the Senate. These nightmare scenarios are enough reason to pull back from the brink, but the risks of doing nothing are just as terrifying. If the U.S. holds back and allows Iran to complete its nuclear program in secret, the consequences could be just as disastrous. But spread over years instead of days, a nuclear-armed Iran would instantly change the balance of power in the Middle East. Nations like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt, all regional rivals of Iran, might feel they have no choice but to build nuclear weapons of their own. The result? A nuclear arms race in the most unstable region on Earth. The risk of accidents, miscalculations, and nuclear blackmail would skyrocket. And what about Iran's behavior? A nuclear Iran might feel emboldened to expand its influence across the region through proxy wars. cyber attacks and covert operations, knowing that its enemies would fear pushing back too hard against a country with nuclear weapons. Worse still, the United States could lose its credibility as the world's leading superpower. If Iran goes nuclear and we do nothing to stop them, warned one defense analyst, then every rogue nation on Earth will see the message loud and clear. You can defy America, cheat the system, and win. North Korea did it. Iran did it. Who's next? Maybe Syria? Maybe others? This chilling thought has deeply shaken many in Congress and the Pentagon, doing nothing. They argue could create a world far more dangerous than the one we have now. But here's the cruel reality. There is no safe path forward. Each option carries risks that could explode into disaster. Striking Iran could trigger a massive regional war that drags the U.S. into yet another bloody, endless conflict, costing lives, treasure, and global stability. But allowing Iran to become a nuclear state could lead to an arms race, unchecked aggression, and a permanent threat hanging over America's allies and possibly America itself. These impossible choices have left the U.S. Senate bitterly divided. Each senator knows that this decision will shape history, and that whichever path they choose, the consequences could be deadly. And while the political battle rages in Washington, the world holds its breath, hoping, praying that this dangerous moment does not spiral out of control. In the end, one truth remains: the risks of action are terrifying. But so are the risks of doing nothing. This is why America and the world stands on the edge of uncertainty, with no clear way forward. The heated debate over striking Iran isn't limited to the marble floors of the U.S. Senate or the closed doors of the White House Situation Room. It has spilled into American homes, coffee shops, workplaces, and perhaps most fiercely onto social media platforms where millions of voices are shouting, questioning, and arguing over what should be done. And just like the Senate, the nation itself is deeply and dangerously divided. A fresh national poll reveals how split the American public really is. When asked if the U.S. should launch military action to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, 48% of Americans said yes, believing that it's better to act now than to face a nuclear-armed Iran in the future. But almost 45% said no, insisting that the country must avoid another war at any cost, even if it means Iran becomes a nuclear power. The remaining 7%? They're undecided, frozen by uncertainty, unsure which risk is worse. This close division reflects something deeper than simple disagreement. It reveals a national anxiety, a weariness that has haunted the American mind for decades. The wounds of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars have not yet healed. Thousands of lives lost, trillions of dollars spent, and decades of bloody conflict have left many Americans questioning whether military action ever truly solves anything, or only makes the world more dangerous. Social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok have turned into digital battlegrounds where passionate opinions clash every minute. One viral tweet reads, "Haven't we learned anything from Iraq and Afghanistan? No more wars? No more young Americans sent to die for conflicts we can't win." This message has been shared, liked, and commented on thousands of times, reflecting the fear that any strike on Iran will lead straight into another endless, costly war. But not everyone agrees. An equally viral post counters, "If we don't act now, Iran will finish its bomb and then it will be too late. They'll threaten Israel, blackmail the world, and bully every nation in the Middle East. We must act before they become unstoppable." Supporters of military action argue that history has already shown what happens when the world looks the other way. They point to North Korea, a country that was allowed to develop nuclear weapons while the world hesitated. Now they say America and its allies must live with that threat forever. Even veterans, the men and women who have seen the horrors of war firsthand, are divided on this issue. Some retired generals and soldiers have appeared on news shows, warning the nation not to rush into another conflict. One former Marine put it plainly on live television, "I've buried too many friends already. Another Middle Eastern war? That's a price this country can't afford to pay again." But others, veterans of past wars, argue the opposite. They warn that only strength can deter Iran from aggression, that showing weakness now could lead to far worse consequences later. Iran doesn't understand kindness. They understand force. If we hesitate, they will finish the bomb, and then you'll see real danger, said one former army colonel. This back and forth, this lack of national unity, has become a reflection of what's happening in Washington itself. In the Senate, Democrats are clashing bitterly, unable to agree on whether military action is the right move. Out in the country, ordinary Americans are having the very same argument at kitchen tables, in classrooms, on talk shows, and in online forums. Even America's allies are watching this public confusion with unease. European leaders fear a sudden U.S. strike could trigger chaos. Middle Eastern governments are quietly preparing for any outcome, wondering if war is coming to their doorstep. Inside the White House, advisors are said to be carefully tracking these public opinion waves. The president, so far silent on the matter, knows that any decision on Iran could tear the country apart politically, just as the wars in Iraq and Vietnam did before. Pollsters and analysts warn that this national split makes any military action extremely risky for the government. No matter what the White House decides, strike or hold back, nearly half the country is likely to be angry, fearful, and distrustful. Even the media is split. Some cable news networks air heated debates about the dangers of appeasement, urging the government to show strength and bomb Iran's nuclear sites. Others warn of the horrifying human cost of such a decision, showing footage of destroyed cities from past wars to remind viewers of what could be unleashed. In the end, one thing is perfectly clear: the United States is a nation deeply torn. Not only in its leadership, but in its very soul. Americans know that this moment matters. That this decision, whether to launch a military strike or not, could change the course of history. But as of now, there is no clear path, no simple answer, no national consensus, only fear, uncertainty, and the heavy knowledge that whatever choice is made, it will come at a terrible price. As the entire world watches, breath held, eyes fixed on Washington, the White House remains completely silent. Not a single official statement, not even a whisper from the president himself. Behind the scenes, however, the tension is said to be unbearable. Multiple sources within the administration have confirmed that the president's own team, the very advisors sworn to guide him in moments of global crisis, are now bitterly divided. One faction, made up of military generals, intelligence officials, and a few hawkish political advisors, is reportedly pushing hard for a limited surgical strike. Their argument is simple but chilling: act now, strike hard, and set Iran's nuclear program back by years before it's too late. They claim there is no longer time for sanctions, no longer patience for diplomacy. The risk of a nuclear Iran is simply too great. But the other side, a group of senior diplomats, international relations experts, and cautious cabinet members, are practically begging the president to hold back. A strike will ignite a firestorm across the Middle East, they warn. The region will explode, American soldiers and civilians will die, oil prices will soar, and Iran will only become more desperate, more dangerous. In other words, both paths lead to darkness. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Iran's government has made its position brutally clear, standing in front of the world's press. A top Iranian government spokesman delivered this chilling promise: "We will not be bullied. Any attack on Iran will be met with total destruction of American interests in the region. Military bases, oil fields, cities, nothing will be safe." These defiant words have only deepened the growing anxiety in Washington. Inside the Pentagon, officials are said to be working around the clock, quietly preparing dozens of different battle plans, just in case. Options range from simple airstrikes on nuclear sites to full-scale military campaigns designed to crush Iran's ability to retaliate. War simulations have been run repeatedly. Military assets have been moved into the region. U.S. forces in the Middle East have been placed on high alert. Yet no final decision has been made, and that's the most terrifying part of all. America now stands on the very edge of history, right at the crossroads between war and peace, destruction and diplomacy. With no clear path forward, the clock is ticking. Every hour that passes without a decision is another hour of uncertainty. Another hour when a simple mistake, a wrong move by either side, could spark a chain of events that spirals far beyond anyone's control. World leaders are calling Washington constantly, pleading for restraint, warning of consequences. Israel, Saudi Arabia, and other U.S. allies are quietly preparing for possible conflict. Russia and China are watching, waiting, calculating how this crisis could shift. The balance of global power in their favor, even global markets are feeling the tension. Oil prices have already jumped on the mere threat of conflict. Investors are pulling back. Businesses across Europe and Asia are holding off on major deals, worried that war in the Gulf could cripple the world economy overnight. And ordinary people? They watch the news, scroll their phones, and wonder, what happens tomorrow? Will this all explode into chaos, or will cooler heads somehow, miraculously, prevail? For many Americans, this uncertainty brings back painful memories. The long wars in Iraq and Afghanistan started with decisions made in moments just like this, moments where leaders thought they could control what came next. History proved them wrong. Will this be another such moment? Another war that was supposed to be limited, but turns endless? Or will diplomacy somehow succeed, even in these final, desperate hours, buying the world more time, delaying disaster for just a little longer? No one knows, not the senators, not the generals, not even the president. And so the world holds its breath. Waiting. Hoping. Fearing. Because whatever decision is made to strike or not to strike will shape the course of history. It will decide not just the fate of Iran's nuclear program, but the safety of millions, the stability of the Middle East, and the very credibility of the United States as a global superpower. The stakes have never been higher. The uncertainty has never been greater. And the clock continues to tick down toward an unknown future.